forward in on our discussion. We have with us Senior Advocate Abhishek Manu Singhvi. As we all know, he has served as the Additional Solicitor General of India. He's a third-time sitting MP. He's an author. He's a commentator, and there's a huge following of what he speaks. In a sense, I have heard his lectures, and there is a lot of takeaways. So we are all keenly waiting to hear you, sir. Uh, uh, please share your opinion on the topic media and law with us.
Well, you've certainly chosen a very vital theme, but as vital as it is, it's also a very large theme. It's as large as the universe. So I think none of us can do better than highlight some points. But the facets which I wish to highlight, perhaps I might seek forgiveness at the outset, because on this happy occasion of an inauguration, I have some harsh words, not only about freedom of the press, but freedom from the press. And freedom from the press, I think, is an important issue, not in quite the literal way in which I'm putting it, because unless you regulate, fortunately, the very small minority of bad boys in this basket, the fortunately large segment of good boys and the good apples will be affected. Most channels, most digital media, and most print press, fortunately, has been playing within the rules. Otherwise, this would have meant the death of democracy itself. But the unease is because of a very, very growing and a fast growing, some would say even exponentially growing, runaway press segment. And in a media and law discussion, there is as much importance not only to discuss the old 70-year-old concepts which are well established in our law, flowing from 1901A and the First Amendment of the US, all the principles by which we give freedom, but also to discuss the regulation and control of that freedom and the exercise of that freedom with responsibility. And the issue becomes important because the simplest answer to throttle somebody, to control somebody, to proscribe or to prescribe for that somebody is simply a remedy which is worse than the disease. It's something which I object to myself, however much I might want to regulate the press. Therefore, how do you find means and ways through law to regulate and to self-regulate the press? But let me start by saying that, if the press, possibly the only organ which has been called the fourth organ of state, traditionally all political science teaches about three organs. When we give the exalted status of a fourth organ of state to the press, well, then it cannot quite easily pretend exemption from the slings and arrows of scrutiny, just as much as the other three are. The other three organs are subjected to heavy scrutiny. And I think it is exalted status, even more humongous power to the press, but it brings with it heightened accountability. So I don't think it should grudge when we talk about control, self-control, no doubt, but a new look at control from the excesses and the vices which have crept in. And hierarchically and in a matter of degree, they are least perhaps in the print media, relatively still much, much more in both the visual and now the growing new media, the digital media, if you categorize it across three categories. I also believe that reform has to be a holistic perspective. It can't be piecemeal. So reform in this situation has to range from the sub judice rule, which some of my colleagues have discussed, to the role and responsibility of the media, to the peculiarities of each of these three segments, the textual, the visual, and the digital media, to the role of government, and indeed to a quick look at the voyeuristic depths to which society itself, you and me, have succumbed or gone down to. Because all of it is one part of the same story. First, the larger picture. I think I would be less than honest, and I believe, as Falkiwala said, sometimes words have to be an assault on the senses for reform to occur. So I think you cannot and we should not deny that Indian news, and we are talking more particularly of news, entertainment and media is another segment which has a separate issue, and I don't think we're discussing that. But Indian news has plummeted in the wrong direction of between sense and sensationalism, between news and noise, between civility and chaos, between balance and extremism. In the Jethmalani Memorial Lecture, I gave an example, words which now are being applied not entirely inaccurately to certain channels, certain programs, words like verbal terrorism, visual extremism, and content fundamentalism. Now, if you have that in the press, obviously you have to find ways to do it yourself. Because otherwise, as I said, the good guys will suffer more. The bad guys, in any case, it doesn't matter for them. Undoubtedly, I think it has much to do with what I have called the toxic triangle of viewership, of ratings, and of revenue. This is really a toxic triangle. And if you add to this triangle politics, glamour, insidious, indirect government control, premeditated and motivated stands, ambitious, overambitious anchors, a public baying for blood, then you get a heady cocktail which would make the manufacturers of whiskey, rum, and vodka blush. This is actually the cocktail you are seeing in some segments of India today in the press. It is fortunately, as I said, a small minority. And it is unfortunate, and all of us know it, all of us have our stories, and you know it more than us because you have possibly seen them at closer quarters and worked with them. It is sad that journalists have mortgaged their training, their calling, their consciences. They have occasionally, fortunately only occasionally, become spokespersons of ideologies, of viewpoints, of authorities. They have gone after pelf, power, and propriety and property. And that is not the domain for which this huge freedom called the First Amendment was given, or the press freedom was given. In the visual media, the techniques are well known. Non-level playing debate fields, deliberate interruptions, gleeful verbal blood sport, conscious invitation of biased and malicious participants, strategic cutting off of mics, formulation of one-sided themes, unevenly numbered viewpoints, and there are many, many more standard tactics which all of us have known, have experienced, and see every day regarding TRP ratings and advertisement revenues. And these are things which is the nature of the problem. And before I come to some solutions, the last and not the least is society in general. I don't think society in general can be very, very moralistic and pat itself on the back as an exempt category, because I think society itself is a principal accused in this heady cocktail. Viewership would not drive this engine unless society loved salacious content, unless society bayed for blood, and unless society relatively has lost its moral compass, its compassion, and its analysis is actually replaced with glee at somebody else's misfortune. So this is all part of that whole story. But take, for example, the sub judice rule. I think today it is, well, it should be accepted by all of us that the sub judice rule died long ago. Even its obsequies were performed long ago, but we still keep on talking of a so-called rule of sub judice. You know, I'm amused when I read old judgments like Sabal's judgment in 61, Rajinder Gandhi in the 80s and 90s, and so on and so forth. They've called these kind of, what we just said, a media becoming prosecutor, jury, judge, everything. They've called it an antithesis of rule of law. They've called it miscarriage of justice. But these are mere adjectives. These are mere words. Today, can you control it? And just to believe that the judge is made of such stern stuff, that he is some kind of a ivory tower immunity, that he's not going to be influenced by this constant cacophony around him, is to live in an unreal world. Cardozo in 1921, imagine, in 1921 there was not even visual media, forget digital media. He anticipated it beautifully in these two words, a larger passage, but these two words. He said the great tides and currents which engulf the rest of men do not turn aside in their curse and pass the judges by. Because judges are human. And the whole object of these attempts by the press or sections of the press is to precisely deal with those humans and put them under unparalleled pressure. I think also that to some extent misplaced benevolence by the judges in extreme cases is also responsible. We'd be fooling ourselves unless we underline that misplaced benevolence. There are only, as I said, a few bad apples. if the judges were to choose a few egregious defaulters and make examples of them, you would find reform occurring much more quickly. Now, nothing is good. All this is mere lament and seminar sermon unless we talk of some remedies. Remember, the problem here is, and the delicacy here is, the remedies we talk of is not off with their heads, not pass a law, proscribe. The problem is how to control it, largely from self-regulation. It's very easy to give a farman for other segments and say you put this restriction or that restriction, but you have to uphold that valued, cherished freedom of 19(1)(a) as well. So how do you do it? Well, the first is to start with awareness of lapse, awareness of accountability, and awareness of urgent necessity, starting right in the middle of the press itself. Second, it must start with this paradox: external regulation and control be eschewed, but internal genuine control start. Now, what is happening here? You're all press people, and I think people like Kartikeya and you know it better than all of us. The press council is worse actually than a toothless tiger, because actually a tiger can roar. I don't think the press council can roar even. Now, in fact, one of the outgoing chairmen of the press council asked for a repeal of the act. He said, you better have a new act altogether. No point having this act at all. What is the main reason? We create this fantastic peer regulatory structures. And we got this concept of peer regulation from England. But what is the reality? And unless we speak bluntly, the reality is that most peer regulations, and this, by the way, applies to medicine and law as much as press. I don't want to enter into a thorny thicket right now. This peer regulation has largely failed. Why? Because there's an incestuous club. There is a conspiracy of silence amongst the peers who cannot take those strong actions. There is a tribe feeling, an old boy's feeling, or an old girl's feeling, which doesn't allow solid, real reform to happen. How do you have reform? Take, for example, the visual media. The NBSA, the National Broadcasting Association, of which now, happily, we are having some very good retired Supreme Court judges in a heading role, in the adjudicatory role, actually is doing a good job. But if you look closely, it is not allowed to do a good job. It starts with warning, then censure, then impose some small little fine. So it's a graded hierarchy of punishment, which is the way self-regulation should work. In the press, there is a different kind of, in the printed press, a different kind of regulation, but I'm talking more of the visual one, where the excesses are more egregious. But what happens? They have one real power, that they can recommend that Tarun Nangya's license be revoked. They can write that. You know, I led a delegation to the NBSA some months ago. There is hardly one or two cases where they've had, because of this incestuous circle, the case of recommending that. Now they know, they meaning your tribe knows the egregious defaulters, but they hardly ever are able to recommend. Now the other twist in the tail, when you do recommend, and you know, you need to not only bare your teeth and snarl, you need to bite sometimes. So NBSA doesn't bite enough. But the other problem is that when it bites, it is not recognized by the government as a recognized institution. So you have the equally funny situation of the absolutely rogue channels and rogue players simply just at the last minute, when they're about to be taken action against, resigning from the membership of the NBSA. So I'm a rogue channel. I do all the violations. Just before the NBSA is about to recommend taking away of my license, I will resign. If I'm not a member of your association, then your writ doesn't run against me. Why? Because the government of India has not recognized any one such institution as, for example, under the Cable Act or under one of these acts, whose writ will then run whether you're a member or not. So you have this very funny comic situation of egregiously violating channels, simply walking out of membership and then say you do what you like. In fact, there are some of those channels which have formed their own association after having gone out. These are simple lacunae which ought to be immediately rectified, because the glory of this fourth estate is in jeopardy. And what is in jeopardy much more than those egregious defaulters is you. The good channels, the good press part is in jeopardy. I think there is most importantly a urgent necessity to have an independent rating agency. At the base of all this problem is this animal, this creature we call TRP. It's, as I've said in the Jethmalani Memorial Lecture, I said I would give the Nobel Prize for miniaturization to assess viewer likings by 30,000 meters in a country of 125 crores. That's a Nobel Prize for miniaturization, because in all there are 30, now I told there are 42,000 meters in the country. From that, you get the entire TRP rating. From that TRP rating, you get the entire advertisement revenue, and the advertisement revenue determines content. So all these claims you have, 8 o'clock top channel, 8:30 top channel, 9 o'clock top channel. Why can't you have an independent ratings agency? It's because of the same conspiracy of silence. It's because of the same incestuous tribe of old boys clubs and old girls clubs. So therefore, these are things which you should address. And last but not the least, the other so-called conspiracy of silence, or if I may say, much worse, conflicts of interest, have meant that one of the oldest bills pending in our parliament till today, in some form or the other, it keeps lapsing, keeps getting a new version, is the broadcasting bill, which was first brought in 1997. Now, each one of us, especially us as parliamentarians, knows why it is never taken up. It is not taken up because it's the first honest attempt to address issues of ownership, control, conflict of interest in terms of percentages of ownership, conflict of interest across platforms, press, printed, visual, or digital media. As in other parts of the world, such enactments try to create Chinese walls between ownership and editorial discretion, between percentages or platforms and control. This bill, according to me, will never be passed because it suits no one. Now, we don't like a lot of Chinese things nowadays, but Chinese walls in this area are very important. So let us not shun Chinese walls. All in all, as I end, I would like to say that we have had a long period of about 70 years, or at least 60 of those 70 years, of a trajectory of growth of fundamental rights of the press. That's a given. That's not something with which we need to cavil. We need to consolidate it. We need to work out the rough edges. We need to work out the nuances. We need to work out the nitty-gritty of contempt law, sub judice rule, etc. What we need much more is now the duties part of the press, not only the rights part, and how to do that effectively through law. Because otherwise you are in the jungle raj of the media, and it is ultimately the worst for media. And ultimately, if it is the worst for the media, it is the worst for democracy itself. So in that sense, we owe it to not only ourselves, but to India and to every country which cherishes free press. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singhvi. Like a very fine argument, piece by piece, you've taken off everything that you could have said. Thank you so much for that intervention. But I have 3 points to make. You made a term, news not noise, in your address. This term was coined by Kartikeya Sharma 11 years ago, I think 9 years ago, when NewsX was started. Am I right, Mr. Sharma? You had told.
Kartikeya will probably note another channel has now plagiarized that.
Sir, fortunately, there is law on plagiarism, but not on regulation right now. And you see, I remember having this conversation with one of my editors who said, you never use a negative connotation in a byline, and you don't use the word not. And I said, well, in our generation, we do like to use it as long as we are symbolizing it for what we stand for. And we wanted to stand for that we are not a noisy channel, but we only present news the way it is. So, you know, that was very, very important to us as a news channel.